I think I twice. Just a second.
Okay, so we are live.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yep, there you are.
I kind of like this. I kind of like the special effects, Cammy. Go for it. Turn that back on.
Yeah, you like that? That was real nice, wasn't it?
That was way cool.
Reverb.
Cammy's stunt double, sweet. You have a stunt double.
Who's that? Who's that? Who is my stunt double?
They must be amazing, whoever they are.
I know. It's a mystery. I can't wait.
I thought you did your own work.
Don't tell anybody.
All right, well, we are live, I think. Which means we should start. Good morning, welcome to the second Sunday of Advent. It is actually the feast day of Saint Nicholas of Myra, who is the character, the person who became Santa Claus in legend, in theory, and in today's culture. And he was a bishop in Myra as to the community who constantly sought to offer his generosity in subtle and hidden ways. Although he always got found out, so it couldn't have been too hidden, but would drop coins through windows. Windows would be left open so that socks could dry that were hung on the window, which is where we get our stockings from. And he would drop coins in those socks to neighbors in the community. And there are some theories that say he dropped also coins down chimneys, but that seems like a whole lot of work to climb up on a roof and drop all that down there if you don't have a sleigh of 8 tiny reindeer, which we don't have in church record of having that. But it is that feast day of St. Nicholas, and it is our second Sunday of Advent as we enter into this season of waiting and expectation and offering the traditional prayer, "Come, Lord Jesus, come." And so as we begin our worship today, John is going to share with us in song, and I will turn it over to him and let him do so. John, it's all yours.
All right, can everyone hear me on there? All right, perfect. All right. Let's sing joyful, joyful. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, open to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy thy works shall rejoice around me. Earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around me. Center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing mountain, call us to rejoice in me. Mortals join the mighty chorus which the morning stars began. Father love is reigning o'er us, brother love binds man to man. Ever singing march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us onward in the triumph song of life. Hopefully you guys were able to hear that.
Ross, it's all you.
Gonna help if I unmute myself. Everyone hear me all right? Looking for a thumbs up from somebody. Yep, all right. So we're gonna continue with our journey through the Bible today. And as usual, we're gonna start with our video. And just a reminder that you know, the reason that we do this video is twofold, right? It's a reminder of kind of where we've been so far, and it's also a reminder of how the Bible is one big story. We tend to break it up into chapter and verse and smaller little bits, but the idea behind the video is to pull it together into one long, large, beautiful story. So if you'll take a minute, we'll watch the video. There's a chance to interact there in your homes as part of this, which you can do, and we'll come back at the end.
For the next 2 minutes, turn and share with someone next to you. Share something interesting about your parents or grandparents. Now, let your partner share. Are you ready? Shh, quiet please. We're about to start. Now let's take a look back at our story so far. The Bible is a sacred story, echoed to us from the ancients. An epic, revealing the great Creator's pursuit of wholeness for all of creation. May we find ourselves in this amazing story. The Creator, a great and mysterious being called God, filled the earth with light and land and every kind of creature, including humans, who reflected God's own image. Looking over creation, God thought, "This is very good." Then, God set aside a day for humans to rest and enjoy being with God. God tried to protect the humans, but Adam and Eve gave in to temptation, believing they could have God's wisdom right away. Pain, struggle, and death entered their world. Later, Adam and Eve's son, Cain, killed his brother Abel in a jealous rage. So Cain was sent away to wander the earth. Before long, civilizations emerged, but humans filled the world with hatred and violence, and God's heart broke. So God decided to start over by sending a flood. But God provided a plan for Noah to save each kind of creature. When the floods came, the ark floated safely on the surface. After the water receded, God stretched a rainbow across the sky as a promise of a new beginning. Then, God made this covenant with a man named Abraham. "This land is for your family, which will be like the stars, too many to count. They'll be my blessing to the entire world." Abraham and his wife Sarah laughed in disbelief. "We never could have children, and now we're too old." But they weren't too old for a miracle. After 25 years, they had Isaac, which means laughter. Isaac and Rebekah had twins. Esau, who foolishly traded his firstborn rights for a bowl of soup. And Jacob, who tricked their father into giving him Esau's blessing. But Jacob ran away because he feared Esau would kill him. Along his journey, a man sent from God wrestled with Jacob and renamed him Israel, meaning struggler with God. Later, Jacob returned, bowing to Esau. And Esau forgave him and welcomed him home. Jacob, now called Israel, had 12 sons and a daughter. He gave his favorite, Joseph, a beautiful coat. But Joseph's brothers hated him and sold him into slavery. Even worse, Joseph's slave owner threw him in prison for something he didn't do. But God gave Joseph the ability to interpret dreams. When he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, he was made second in charge of Egypt. Later, famine struck the Promised Land. So Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt for food. Joseph told them, "God turned your evil into something good. I will take care of our family." So all of Israel's family moved to Egypt and enjoyed the blessings that God had given to Joseph. But peace in Egypt didn't last. A new Pharaoh was threatened by Israel's growing family. Let's continue this story right now.
Okay. Next thing we're going to share is just our symbol for this week. If you have any crayons or drawing instruments available, if you want to draw the symbol at home, you can do that. You can share pictures of it on Faith Life. But Patrick, I think you've got the slides with the picture of the symbol. And just as a reminder, the point of redrawing the symbol is when we create our own version of the story symbol, it embeds in our minds, right? An image helps kind of get the creative juices flowing and helps you remember, right? So that's the purpose behind it. Doesn't have to be exactly like that. You can do your own version, but feel free to do that, to doodle on that, and work on that as you're listening to the story. Now, before we get into the story, we always like to talk about the Bible, and it's just a way to prepare ourselves. So we like to compare the Bible to a different image or object, and the image or object that we're going to compare to today is a brilliant diamond. When you look closely at a diamond in the light, you'll see incredible reflections. You look carefully, you'll notice the intricate detail, beauty, depth, and brilliance of the diamonds on many sides. The Bible is like a brilliant diamond. Over thousands of years, Jewish rabbis have said that when we tell Bible stories, it's like holding up a diamond and slowly turning it in the light. The Spirit of God illuminates the stories and shows us new reflections of meaning each time. We see more details, beauty, depth, and brilliance every time we hear them. What if we thought of the Bible this way, expecting to see something remarkable and brilliant each time, looking deeply for a reflection from the story to teach us something new? And now we're going to just give you a little bit of a background on the story, as we normally do. As modern Western thinkers, we often see things as either history or fiction, with nothing in between. But many other cultures, especially ancient ones, only see things as in between. This is true of the ancient Israelites who gave us the Bible. Generation after generation, they passed down their cultural memories, true message carrying stories. The stories we have in the Bible focus less on historical facts and more on the meaning behind them. Think about this. We typically ask how the evidence supports historical facts, science, or archaeology. Or we question how these events defy logic and natural laws. But what if we ask instead, why did the ancients tell these stories? What meaning about God and life were they trying to share? And what truth does the story carry for our lives today? Okay, I'll ask at this time that we're going to start in with today's story on the Exodus. Scene 1, slavery. Joseph and his family became known as the people of Israel, named after Joseph's father. They lived peacefully with the Egyptians for many years. In fact, their family grew so quickly that they began to populate the entire country of Egypt. A new Pharaoh was in power who didn't remember how Joseph saved Egypt from the great famine generations before. Pharaoh worried, there are too many Israelites. If we don't control them now, they'll rise up and fight against us. So Pharaoh forced them to be his slaves and to do hard labor. Then Pharaoh gave the order, throw every newborn son of the Israelites into the Nile River to drown. In desperation, an Israelite mother sent her baby down the Nile River in a basket in hopes that he would be saved. Downstream, Pharaoh's daughter heard the baby crying and felt sorry for him. She lifted the baby out of the water and took him home as her own. She named him Moses, a name that means to lift out or rescue. When Moses grew up, he ventured away from Pharaoh's palace to visit some of his Israelite relatives. Right away, he noticed how harshly they were being treated. He even saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite slave. Moses looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. But someone saw what happened and reported it to Pharaoh, who sent soldiers to kill Moses. So Moses escaped to the wilderness. Years passed, and a new Pharaoh came into power. Meanwhile, Moses had started a new life as a shepherd. Scene 2, first plagues. One day, while watching his sheep, Moses noticed a bush that was on fire, but wasn't burning up. He said to himself, "That's amazing. I have to get a closer look." As Moses walked toward the bush, God called, "Moses, take off your sandals. Where you're standing is holy ground." Moses dropped to the ground and he hid his face in fear. Then God said, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I hear my people crying in pain. I haven't forgotten my promise to bless and protect them. I've chosen you to meet with Pharaoh and lead them out of Egypt, back to the promised land." Moses begged God, "Why me? Who am I? Please, God, send someone else. I'm clumsy with my words." God said, "I'll help you to speak clearly and give you the words to say." "Who should I tell them has sent me?" Moses asked. God replied, "Tell them I am, the God who is, has sent you." Right away, Moses met with his brother Aaron and told him all that God had said. Together, they confronted Pharaoh, pleading, "Let the Israelites leave Egypt for just 3 days to worship God. If you don't, God will punish the Egyptians severely." Pharaoh said, "I don't know who your God is. This is just an excuse to get out of doing your jobs. I will not let you leave. Now get back to work." Then Pharaoh told his soldiers, "The Israelites are lazy. Make them work harder." So they forced the Israelites to do unbearable labor day and night, making bricks from mud and straw. To get Pharaoh's attention, God sent a series of warnings called plagues. The first plague turned Egypt's source of life, the Nile River, into blood. All the fish died. The water became undrinkable and smelled terrible. The next plague brought an outbreak of frogs. They hopped everywhere in the Egyptians' beds, in their ovens, and even inside their cups and bowls. After each plague, Moses would ask Pharaoh again to let the Israelites go. And Pharaoh would say, "Enough. If you stop the plagues, I'll let you leave." But after each of the plagues stopped, Pharaoh went back on his promise and refused to let the Israelites go. The next plague sent a deep darkness that covered Egypt for 3 days. At that time, the Egyptians worshipped Pharaoh and also had different gods for the sun, crops, cattle, and the rivers. And they even had a frog goddess. These plagues were a direct attack on what was sacred to the Egyptians. Moses warned Pharaoh about a final plague. "If you don't let us leave now, every firstborn son will die, including your own. People will weep in the streets. Then you'll beg us to leave Egypt." But God had made Pharaoh even more stubborn, and he refused to listen. Moses was furious as he left this final meeting. Scene 3, deliverance. God gave the Israelites special instructions on how to be saved from this final plague. Moses told them, each family is to select a healthy, pure male lamb. Be careful not to break any of its bones and prepare it as a special meal for your family. Take its blood and spread it on the front door frame of your home. This blood will be a sign to God that a pure lamb was given in place of your oldest son. That night, the people of Israel carefully followed every instruction, including the one to put blood from a lamb on the door frames of their homes. At midnight, loud screams and weeping woke everyone in Egypt. The oldest son had died in nearly every Egyptian home, including Pharaoh's. Pharaoh and the Egyptians begged the Israelites to leave right away. That night, the Israelites set out to return to their promised land. While it was dark, God lit their path through the wilderness with a pillar of fire. When daylight broke, a tower of clouds appeared, shielding them from the hot desert sun, guiding them forward. Before long, they arrived at the banks of a wide sea. All of a sudden, they heard the rumbling of horses. Behind them, in the distance, they spotted Pharaoh and his armies chasing them. Trapped, the Israelites started to panic. They screamed at Moses, "Why did you lead us out here to die? Slavery would be better than this." But Moses reassured the people, "Don't be afraid. God will provide a way out for us." Then Moses raised his hands toward the sea. God stirred up strong winds that blew against the water all night. The winds pushed back the sea, opening a path for the Israelites to walk across. But Pharaoh and his armies were closing in, and they began to follow the Israelites on this dry path across the sea. As soon as the last Israelite made it to shore, Moses stretched out his hand again toward the water. Immediately, a huge wind blew the waters back together, drowning Pharaoh and his armies. The Israelites watched in amazement. They burst into celebration, dancing, singing, and thanking God for rescuing them. They put their trust in God and in Moses. This was a day the people of Israel would remember forever. So we're just going to take a moment. We're going to let that settle in your mind and ask that you pay attention to whatever may stand out to you from that story. And we'll go into our questions. At this time, we'd like to ask you to share. You can unmute yourself and talk to the group. If you're more comfortable typing something in the comments, you can do that. What did you see or sense? And what sticks out to you from the story?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello? All
Yeah.
right. Hey, this probably isn't very impressive, but my thought was when they talk about naming like she named him Moses, and then they said it was because he was, I can't remember what the meaning was, but do they know that meaning before they name him? Or did that meaning come later after he lived his life? I guess that's my question. Because it seems like it would help them, like I'm sure he was hunted, and I would think that would have helped him be found if they knew that was what that name meant.
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's not a good question. It's a dumb question, but it's all I got.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's very good because I had that same thought.
Oh, well, then it is good,
It
Kim.
was brilliant.
What sticks out to me when I hear this story now, as opposed to, children's Bible story time type stuff, is a reminder that that wind wasn't just 30 seconds of movie magic. It was the whole night pushing the sea back. And I don't know, I'd like to be a, fly in the tent of some of the, non-main story characters of what families were thinking with that rushing wind all night. And if they looked outside to see what was going on, to push the seas to clear a path.
I've got to admit, Ross, I got stuck before you even told the story. I think what stood out to me most in what you shared was the introduction before what you shared about how we like to see things as either fact or fiction, but consider more the reasons of why these stories were told and why they were shared. And I think that kind of spoke to me because I tend to have a really terrible memory, and the stories that I tell and the memories that I share lie somewhere between fact and fiction. And Patrick can concur, and my parents too, I'm sure, that I'll tell stories about my memories and what happened, and they'll be like, that's not what happened at all. But it's not that I'm purposefully trying to mislead, but I'm sharing the story for a particular reason. Like, and it's the essence of the story and the meaning of the story behind it, the reason why I'm sharing it, not necessarily because I've got all of the facts right. So that I thought that was, I appreciate being able to consider the stories in the Bible in the same way that I share my own memories that are only, I don't know, maybe 30% true sometimes.
It's like a drunken retelling and she's not been drunk. It's weird. The more I've sat in these stories as I've gotten older is how terrifying these stories are and how we sterilize them by familiarity and by also just trying to make them teachable to younger generations or to broad masses. And they're terrifying stories if you actually sit and think about it and think about, like, oh yeah, plague of frogs, that sounds really pleasant, or any of the other 9 plagues that happen, like and then the winds blowing to part the sea for them to cross. All of it just sounds pretty miserable, and we just kind of go through it and whatever is like some fable or fairy tale.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. I'm going to read this is a comment I think from Jim. What strikes me in a broad sense is that God will have his way through time, through people, through situations. God will have his way. All right, our next 2 questions. What does the story say about you? What does it say about humanity?
What does it say about humanity? That we're stubborn. I mean, Patrick talking about how horrible those plagues were, it didn't take one, it took a whole bunch. And every time Pharaoh was like, oh yeah, well now they're gone, now I changed my mind. Just, thinking about, I can't think of anything in particular, but I'm like, there's got to be something in my own life, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, well now that's gone. Okay, I'm going to go back to my old ways again. And I mean, those plagues were horrible. And every time Pharaoh was like, oh no, just kidding, send another one.
Yeah. Kind of along those same lines, those plagues weren't just on the Egyptians. They were on the Israelites too. And, how many times do we ask for something and we expect the something to be the absolute next step? Whereas this was a, 10-step process of, going through all these different inconveniences, major or minor, before the end result found its way through.
Yeah, I think for me, what struck me in this is I remember as a teenager hearing this story and kind of sitting back and saying, how could Israel be so stupid, right? Like that they constantly forget God, and here, in this story, you have God saves their children through this incredible miracle with the blood on the door frame, leads them out of slavery with a pillar of fire and a pillar of clouds, right? Clearly, God is with them, and they get to the dead end, right, with the sea, and immediately the people are like, what gives, Moses? What gives, God? Like, what'd you do? Like, send us back. And just how quickly they lose faith, even though, God had demonstrably been leading them the entire time, and they quickly sort of turn. And I remember as a teenager thinking, you're so stupid, right? Like, clearly God's with you, like, just have faith. It's really easy to sit back and say that, but I think as if I look at myself, and I think collectively as a church, it's easy, right? I mean, I think that's our story too. It's really easy to forget what God has done for us, and forget that the God is leading us, and you get into a tough spot, and to question those things. I think it's truly kind of a normal thing. Sadly, I wish my faith was stronger, that I never did. But I think I identify with Israel far too often.
Bonnie shared in the comments, unfortunately, it sometimes takes bad things to bring us back to needing God. It shouldn't be that way, but often it is. I'm reading a book right now on the science and the neurology of spiritual formation. Sounds really exciting, I know. But in it, they talk about, there was a study that was done by people that said, they prayed for something and it came to pass. And so how did that affect their formation? But there were some people who were looking at that and said, well, what about the people that prayed for something and it didn't come to pass the way they prayed for it? What did their faith do? Where did that go? And so they went and made their own exploration in that way, and found that actually those who prayed for something, protection, healing, blessing, whatever it is. And usually when we pray those things, they're prayers that are about providing us normalcy, balance, comfort, restoration, which are good prayers and should be prayed. But they found that when those weren't answered, the path of those people actually led them on a path of deeper formation than the people who were actually had their prayers answered or appeased. And so it's just interesting, kind of in light of this, of what happens when we pray for something and it doesn't happen. Does it mean that God's not good, doesn't care? Is he not interested in taking care of his children like we talk and pray and preach? Or is there something else going on there? So I just thought it was interesting. It ties up well with this conversation.
Okay, the last two questions. In what ways do you personally struggle to live within God's boundaries? Which of the characters of the story are you most like, and how?
So the story that Ross shared doesn't really follow the biblical retelling. So when Esau meets Jacob, I think it was the video actually, when Esau meets Jacob after being apart, the video kind of conveys that Jacob went back and lived in the motherland with Esau and they continued their existence there. But in the biblical account, Esau greets him and it is this restoration of that relationship. And Esau is like, there's plenty of land here, come live with us. And Jacob's like, okay, and then he doesn't. And so it's just kind of this thing of like, anytime I read that or think of that or reminded of that, I'm thinking like, God brings us to places of good stuff, but it kind of is in the face of the shame of our past story. And so we tend to just move away from it because it makes us uncomfortable to be reminded of the mistakes we've made in our past.
Well, this may not be the right time to share, but I did draw a picture. There's my interpretation of the symbol. Using my highlighters and pens.
Nice.
Those are the most amazing looking eggs ever.
No, we're talking about some high class artwork here.
Can everyone hear me? I think I'm a lot like Moses in the fact that when he was called at the burning bush, he said he wasn't the right man for the job, and he didn't have all the gifts or whatever, the talents. A lot of times when I feel like an opportunity is in front of me, I feel like a lot of times I feel like I don't have what it takes to talk to a person or something, or do what God's calling me to do. So
Any other final thoughts from anyone? Okay. Well, thank you for the engagement. If you think of something else, you can always post in Faith Life. If you're watching on video, you can do the same after the fact. But appreciate the interaction. And at this point, who am I turning it over to, Patrick?
Turn it over to me.
You. There you go.
All right. This is our time for typically praise and petitions, but we just do a meditative prayer for the people because we'll share our praise and petitions and a chance of connecting after we turn off the Zoom call in that space. So I ask you to join me for this guided prayer. I'll offer moments of pausing and reflection for you to either think of these things, or if you want to unmute and share a particular request or prayer, you're certainly welcome to do that in that silence. But let's pray. God, we adore you because you've come to us in the past. You've spoken to us in the law of Israel. You've challenged us in the words of the prophets. You have shown us in Jesus what you really look like. God, we adore you because you still come to us now. You come to us through other people, through their love and their concern for us. You come to us through men and women who need our help. You come to us as we worship with you and with your people. God, we adore you because you come to us. You will come to us in the end. You will be with us at the hour of death. You will still reign supreme when all other human institutions have failed. You will still be God when our history has run its course. God, we welcome you, the God who comes. He comes to us now in the power of Jesus Christ our Lord. And you'll come again someday in the fullness of your power and your presence. Until then, may we continue as your church to pray the prayer that you taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. We're going to now share the object lesson for this morning. This is from Susie. She pre-recorded this. So let me share it that way.
Good morning. Today we're going to continue with our Advent lesson. Last week, you learned about the prophets. This week, we're going to introduce you to the Holy Family. Now, the Holy Family is on their way to Bethlehem, and we're going to go with them. Here we have Mary, the mother, Joseph, the father, and we have their donkey. Now, Mary, she's about to have a baby, and it can be really hard to walk very far when you're about to have a baby. So sometimes she couldn't take another step, and when that happened, she would ride on the donkey. It's also hard to ride on the donkey when you're about to have a baby, and when she couldn't ride another step, she got down and she walked. So she rode and she walked. They must have been some of the last people to get into Bethlehem that night after falling far behind. Let's move them out of the way a little. Now here we have the light of the prophets. Yep. And here we have the light of the Holy Family. Goodness, okay. Let's just enjoy the light for a second. I know it probably looks a little weird on the video there and you can barely see it. That might be better. So just enjoy them for a second. Let's watch. I am going to change the light. Now, do you see how the light of the prophet is in just one place? I'm going to change it so it is not in just one place. Do you see how the light of the Mother Mary and the Father Joseph is in one place? much as I change it too. Do you see how the light is no longer in one place? It has changed. Now it is spreading out, getting thinner and thinner through the room, and the room is filling up with the light of the prophets and with the light of the Mother Mary and the Father Joseph. Anywhere you go in this room, you can come close to them today. I hope that you all stay safe and healthy and warm, and that you will continue to think about the Advent lessons that you've learned this far and look forward to the future ones. Thank you.
I want to now invite you to prepare for communion. If you want to get your elements ready, they're out there. Growing up, I lived next to my grandparents, Meemaw and Pawpaw. We had a shared driveway, and then they split, and they lived on top of the hill, and we lived at the bottom of the hill. And so we spent a lot of time going back and forth between the houses, and it was not uncommon for me to go and to visit Meemaw. And when I would do that, she was listening to music and ironing clothes or cleaning somewhere in the house, and I'd not intentionally do this, but I'd come in and say hi at some point, or just come up behind her and put my hand on her shoulder, and it almost always led to her screaming and jumping out of her skin. And she'd turn and say, you can't do that to me, Patrick. You've got to whistle when you come into the house. And so it became standard that when I went to go visit Meemaw, I had to start whistling so she wouldn't jump out of her skin. But it was that recognition of the unexpected. She wasn't afraid of me, but she certainly was afraid of what she wasn't anticipating or what she wasn't ready for. And as we read the Advent stories, the stories of the birth of Christ, we see this often in these stories. When Mary is visited, the angel starts with, "Don't be afraid." And when the shepherds are visited, it comes with the same phrase of "Don't be afraid" or "Fear not." And it was a common phrase that was also shared among the prophets in the teachings of "Fear not." And part of it isn't certainly that their message and their presence shouldn't be feared, but it's also recognizing that it's coming unexpectedly. While they're hoping for it, while they're looking for it, they're not necessarily expecting it to happen right then. And so they have to be reminded, they have to be called back to this place of self, the place of their faith, the place of their hope. Fear not, this is the thing that we've been waiting for. And this doesn't come in a place of terror or fear like we have in the story of Egypt and of Exodus with the Israelites. But the Israel's Exodus teaches us an important story because it fueled the imaginations for generations. These were stories that would have been told around the campfire, would have been shared with families at some of the great festivals and the feast of the Israel people. And it was at the heart, it is a story of hope despite the pain and the destruction that happens there. But the Israelites didn't see that at first. They despised being the minority enslaved by this ambitious and greedy Pharaoh who continually sought to get more profit while trying to reduce his cost. In spite of the dependence on their labor, the Pharaoh saw the Israelites as outsiders, as a threat of people who could rise up and steal their possessions, their land, or even their family members. The writer of Exodus begins by focusing on the women in the story, the midwives, a mother, her daughter, a servant, the daughter of Pharaoh. Each one of these acts within their own sphere of influence to resist the Pharaoh's cruel policies. They recognize that what he's doing is unjust, and they're going to have a voice. So they work together, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. They work to do the right thing, to save an infant, the infant Moses in this story. They act with hope. They refuse to let the regime force them into some sort of submission that they know is unrighteous and unjust. And the writer describes these bold actions with the same words that he'll use later to describe God in saving Israel's nation. Consider these examples. Moses' mother saw that he was good, reminding us that God values every human made in his image. She placed him in an ark in the reeds. The ark, or the basket, reminds us of God's rescue of Noah's family from a watery death. Moses' rescue anticipates Israel's future escape from the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea. And the Pharaoh's daughter saw the ark. She saw the baby crying and took pity on him. And suddenly, there's hope for this condemned child. Then we learn that God saw his people suffering. He heard their cries and he was concerned. God's concern moved him to action, and he commissioned Moses to lead the people out of Egypt. The Christian hope is rooted in the fact that God sees us. Nothing escapes his notice, and at first, that's terrifying to us. It shocks us. It makes us kind of jump out of our skin. But at the heart of Advent is knowing that God sees a world that has gone wrong, and he's looking to do something that is to be made right. He may at times seem distant. He may feel like he doesn't hear our suffering or our frustration or our pain, but we're reminded consistently that he acts to uphold the covenant that he's made with Abraham, to bless the generations who seek to be a blessing for others that are around them. This is the same covenant that Jesus brings back into the world to show us how this works beyond the law. The Exodus story invites us to participate in God's audacious work of redemption. The women of the story heard no clarion call like Mary, Elizabeth, and the shepherds did, a voice from the heavens that was prompting them to act. Instead, they lived simply as they knew God would call them to, in justice and righteousness for the goodness and the sake of others. It's the same call for us, that we, although we may not hear the voice of God, that we do what we know is right, what is good, what is a blessing, and that we try to follow in faithfulness to that as best as we can, knowing the right thing to do and then doing it. And it may come as a shock. We may be scared out of our skin at moments, but we hold on to the hope that Christ meets us in that space. Just as he met with his disciples at the Last Supper, as he sat down with them and called them into this place of trying to remember the important essence, although you may forget the details. Remember what's important in the story of the life that they shared with Christ. And so Paul recounts this in 1 Corinthians, where he says, I received from the Lord what I'm now delivering to you. That the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, he took his bread, and when he had given thanks for it, he broke it, and he said, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And in the same way, he took the cup after supper and saying, this is the covenant this is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink of it in remembrance of me. And for as often as you eat of this bread and you drink of this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. May that be our prayer. I want to share a few ministry opportunities. We had a chance to feed the Boys and Girls Club a couple weeks ago for their Thanksgiving, but we are also preparing to do the shopping. Megan shared a Facebook post on the Faith Life. We are providing this year, instead of shopping for their items, they're going to find other ways to do that. And Abby at the Boys and Girls Club has said there's really this need for just some basic home resources. And so we're providing this year basket, laundry detergent, toothpaste, deodorant, soap for just showers, just some basic needs for the families as they're being affected differently this holiday season and could use some of these items. And so we're accepting donations. Still, you can donate online, go through the website and just select the Boys and Girls Club fund that you want that to be directed to, so that we can make sure that we get that supported. In addition, again, we're hosting Family Promise the week of Christmas. And again, I just think it's a really great opportunity that we have to provide meals for those who are without a home this season particularly as we reflect on the Holy Family who also was out without a home when Christ was born. And so Susie, I know, will be getting the signups out for that, for you to commit to preparing and delivering meals for that week, or to donating money so that we can either get meals prepared or get meals from other restaurants. And if you're, we usually, last time we did this, we dropped them off at the hotel doors so that there was no interaction. But if you want to help provide the meals, we can get them dropped off if you're not comfortable doing that. But the signups will be out soon for that. Also, this is the last week for you to be a part of our virtual Christmas Eve service. Jennifer is pulling that together with different videos of song, music, readings, and other elements. Jennifer, anything you need to share about that? I feel like I didn't know if I was missing something. Okay. You want those by this Thursday, correct?
I believe it's Friday, but yeah.
This Friday. And then I'll also let you know we are still continuing conversations on building and sustainability for the future of our church. And so we don't have any new information to share, but we do want you to know that conversation hasn't gone away, even though it certainly feels like it because we haven't been together and everything's weird. So things continue to be weird, but that conversation is continuing. With that, let me give us a benediction, and then we will turn off the Facebook Live and continue sharing online for those that want to stay on. May we go into the world not emboldened by fear, but emboldened by hope that Christ has gone before us, as many others have, as witnesses and examples of the blessing that God hopes to bring into the world in order to restore it and redeem it and bring it into relationship with Him. May we go with that confidence into the world and into our relationships. May God be with you. Go in peace.